Let's go ahead and start today's webinar. Hello, everyone. Welcome to our eLotus webinar today. My name is Donna, and I will be your host and your moderator. For over 2 decades, eLotus has been your trusted source for TCM continuing education for acupuncturists. We offer the largest selection of online CEU courses with 3,000 CE hours. If you are new to eLotus, remember to sign up today for an eLotus account and receive a free 1 CEU course as a welcome gift. This offer is valid for new accounts only. And welcome back everyone to our eLotus webinars. This is our first webinar of the year. We hope you had a safe holiday. If you're in need of live CEUs, you're in luck. This weekend, we'll be hosting a 2-day training with David Hartmann on acupuncture point combinations for the 5 spirits, emotion, and mental wellness. This is a great opportunity for you to master trusted acupuncture protocols and understand why they matter, how they work, and how to combine acupuncture points using various TCM themes. If you don't need CEUs, don't worry. Stay until the end for details on how to audit Saturday's class for free. Okay, that takes care of all the housekeeping. So let's go ahead and give a quick introduction to David Hartmann. David is a licensed acupuncturist and Chinese medicine practitioner from Brisbane, Australia. He has been practicing since 1997 and upgraded his qualifications with a master's of acupuncture in 2009. He is a contracted academic at Endeavour College of Natural Health, where he lectures students in the Bachelor of Chinese Medicine program, and is a keen researcher and writer, and has recently written a textbook titled The Principles and Practical Application of Acupuncture Point Combinations. David has presented at conferences and seminars all over the world. He has a wealth of knowledge in the field of Chinese medicine and is forever researching and learning new things. Thank you so much for being here today, David. Let's go ahead and give him a warm welcome. And David, you can go ahead and share your screen from your end too.
Thank you very much, Donna.
You're welcome.
And hello to everyone. Got some very distant people from lots of different places on the planet so far. Share screen. Okay, are we good? Did that, my screen's up? I have done Zoom quite a bit, but I'm still making sure I've got everything right. So, all right.
Your screen is up.
Great, thank you, Donna. All right, so this is a little snapshot really of what the weekend's going to look like. The weekend itself is actually going to be in excess of 600 slides across the 2 days. So this is going to be a little baby snapshot of it. So we'll just see how we go with it. Okay, so basically the idea behind the workshop came about partly when I started teaching in 2000. I found through the years that the 2 most difficult concepts the students had problems with was how to diagnose a patient and then how to actually construct a treatment off the back of that. The treatments over the years for me have become what I call APCs, or acupuncture point combinations. And that came about from a book that I read years ago, and I still read it now. It was actually an acupuncture point combination book from Jeremy Ross. And it kind of rang with me in my mind about how I wanted to make sense of treatments that were constructed. So I started talking about APCs with my students. And so treatments, acupuncture point combinations kind of tie in as being a similar concept for me. So in Australia, we diagnose using Zhang Fu patterns. So things like liver qi stagnation, spleen qi deficiency, those types of things. We don't do a 5-element diagnosis, but I have read a number of books on it and also done a number of chapters in my book on 5-element diagnosis as well. The workshop is geared more towards Zhang Fu patterns, but there is, within every single condition we talk about, a mention as to which elements involved as well, in case that's more your diagnostic framework. I believe in America, it's a bit split between colleges and universities as to which is 5-element and which is Zhang Fu patterns. So I was trying to make sure I covered both concepts, and because obviously this workshop may in fact go around the world, I wanted to make sure I covered as many diagnostic likelihoods as possible. So the diagnosis is an issue for students to come up with, but also what treatment to use. And so people will often go, okay, well, Giovanni Machichia's got these points that you use for spleen chi deficiency. My patient is spleen chi deficient, so these are the points I'm going to use. And it becomes this kind of rote learning exercise, but it becomes a problem when the person is not completely spleen chi deficient. And we'll talk about that in a minute. The design of the workshop and my book that I wrote came because of that inability of students and then graduates on how best to actually construct a treatment. So the workshop itself is designed to get you thinking about the treatments that you do. Why do you choose the points you use? And could there be a better way of constructing the treatments? I think that if what you do is working, then there's no real reason to change it. But also I'm of the belief that we could probably always do something a little bit better. And in Australia, we have to do 20 CPD points a year. I'm not sure what the number is in America or in other parts of the world. I do travel a fair bit, as Donna mentioned in my introduction, and I do like to find out about what happens with Chinese medicine studies in your country. And so I get a bit of a sense of what's going on. But the CPD points, some people will argue, is it's forced on you. You have to do extra study when you don't really want to. And I guess for me, I think it's a golden opportunity to learn more. And I think that if you're willing to go into any of those additional continuing development courses with the idea that you could learn something and become a better acupuncturist or Chinese medicine practitioner, then I think it's a fantastic opportunity to do that. And that's what we're going to try and do with this as well, is to maybe if you come into it with a bit of an open mind, go, okay, well, maybe Dave's going to give me something that might help me in my clinic tomorrow. Maybe make me look at something a little bit different to the way that I have been. Because what points do you use? Is heart 7 a point you use regularly? Okay, well, do you use any other heart points? Or better yet, excuse me, would you consider using the pericardium channel instead of the heart channel? So the idea is that I challenge you a little bit to look at different ways that you might look at treating someone. Like heart 7, Shen Men, it's an obvious point. It's in my top 10 favorite points in the body, but we don't want to discount other points for the sake of using a point that we absolutely love, because there could be a point that is slightly more specific and will work better with the other points that you select in your treatment as well. So if you come into the workshop willing and committed, you will, in my belief, walk away as a better acupuncturist than when you came in. And this is the thing that's really important to me. I want to give you something that when you finish the workshop, you can use again immediately. The next patient that comes in that fits in the box of what we talked about over the weekend, bang, there you go, you've got the treatment. Away you go. You can look at what the points did, see how that worked. I'm going to give you my email address a little bit later. You can email me and say, hey, Dave, this is what I did. This is what happened with the patient. I really liked your treatment. Or you can say, oh, there's a couple of points there I didn't really like. I don't like using them. So I swapped them out and added in some of my own. And this was the outcome. I feel like as a community, as a Chinese medicine community, we probably don't get engaged in our clique enough. I think that we have opportunities to be more involved, and I love getting the opportunity to communicate with the wider Chinese medicine community, and this is one of the ways that we can do that. So what's going to happen on the 2 days? Well, the first part of day 1, sorry, I've got a cracky voice today, is looking at things like why acupuncture point combinations matter. Like what's the point of the whole workshop anyway? So we look at why it matters, how they work, treating the person, not the disease. So very quickly, because we will do this in the workshop, it matters because patients aren't typically going to be exactly like what you see in books and exactly like what you see when you studied. They're complex. Every now and then you'll get a patient that comes in with low appetite, fatigue, sleeping all the time, bit of diarrhea, down-bearing, heaviness in the tummy, and you just go spleen chi deficiency, tick. If there was an opportunity for a spleen chi deficiency and then that patient's photo right beside it with a big smile on their face, thumbs up, that's gold when that happens. But it just doesn't happen like that very often because they have other little bits and pieces going on. And so what do you do then? So if you've got a patient that's, say, liver chi stag, well, you go, okay, well, liver 3, probably pretty obvious, gallbladder 34, pericardium 6. I'm not sure how you learn the point names, but liver 3 is Tai Chong, gallbladder 34 is Yangling Chuan, and pericardium 6 is Nag 1. But I'm going to be just using the English names for the points throughout the workshop for the most part. So they're probably your no-brainers for liver chi stagnation. They're quite good because you've got foot, knee, arm, so that the points are sensibly scattered around the body. They're not all stacked in one spot. And then you probably round that out perhaps with, say, front move point of liver, like liver 14 or maybe liver 13. Maybe you do a back shoe point like bladder 18, whatever it is that you do to round it out. Gallbladder 20 is really good for liver chi stagnation as well, especially if the head's involved. But then what happens if they're a bit liver chi stag and a bit spleen chi deficient? Well, now you need to take away some liver chi stag points probably and add in some spleen chi. So all of a sudden now you're looking at points like spleen 3, Tai Bai, spleen 6, Sun Yin Jiao, stomach 36, Susan Lee. And now you start looking at that and going, gee, my points are a bit leg heavy. So I probably need to start to look at putting points in that are not all just below the knee. And so then it's about deciding which points to, I guess, sub out and which points to keep. So the workshop's designed around taking you through those processes. How do acupuncture point combinations work? I mean, it's probably pretty straightforward. Obviously, it's going to move vital substances, qi, blood, body fluids, jing. Depending on what points you use will dictate which ones move. I'm a big fan of not stacking points all in one spot, and you'll see that over the workshop. I just feel like we don't always know where the stagnations are located. So if you have all the points on one side of a stagnation and nothing on the other side, then there could be issues with how effective your treatment actually ends up being. So I'm a big fan of local points, adjacent points, and distal points. I know that there are some wonderful styles of acupuncture out there, like say Dr. Tan, for example, and often they don't even put local points in and they still get great results. So I'm not about bagging any other therapy because every therapy that is known on the planet potentially is effective. So I'm just offering you a way to look at it that I found through lecturing for 20 years. This is the way people often construct their treatments. So it's trying to stick within the wheelhouse of what most people sort of look at doing. Just check my time. I guess I should also point out that when I construct the treatments, I'm typically picking between sort of 8 to 16 needles in total, often bilateral. If you like unilateral, you can look at the design of the treatment and look at that accordingly and make adjustments. If you use less than 8, great. If you use more than 16, great. I've got a friend in Israel who uses 1 needle. So every single patient that comes in, he uses 1 needle, not the same point, but one best needle for the patient's key complaint. And then I've got acupuncturists here in Australia that will use 40 or 50 needles and still get great results. So I get that there's different ways of doing something. So it's not about poo-pooing any other idea. It's about a look at the approach that I'm finding is the most successful at the moment for me. So treat the person, not the disease. Again, it's pretty obvious, but it's just about not giving a patient a label that sticks with them permanently. So just because a patient's diagnosed as maybe, say, a fire element constitution or a heart fire blazing or something like that, that's not the label that they keep. They don't leave the clinic and go to a barbecue and meet some mates and start talking and going, oh yeah, I'm heart fire blazing. Like it doesn't, the concept Doesn't make any sense. And that's not what they are anyway. They are them. That's their name. Who are they as a person? We need to make sure we don't get hung up on still giving them a disease label that is a Chinese medicine diagnosis. Sure, they have it on their file, but they don't leave with it. And they don't even come back in with it because they might come back in as a different diagnosis. They're still coming in as the same person, but they could have a different diagnosis. So treat the person, not the disease. So that's the first part of day one. What we'll also do is look at 21 different APCs. Now, there's plenty of them out there, okay? So we're going to look at the definition. So some of them will be really obvious. There's like a local and distal to start. So you might be like, well, duh, Dave, I get that one. Well, look, not everyone will think that way. So we're going to take you through some ones that might be really obvious and then some more obscure ones, because I don't know what my target audience completely is. And even if you think you know how to use a particular APC, it's always good to be affirmed of that, or to be open your eyes a little bit, like, oh, gee, okay, that's doing a little bit more than what I thought it did. So we look at the definition, we analyze them, depending on the level of it, how old the APC might be, so how obscure it might be. We'll spend a little bit more time making sure we understand those. The point combinations themselves probably really, as a collective, have only been around for 600 to 800 years. I mean, there were always points discussed in some of the classics, but they weren't sort of put together as a combination. So, and really, I guess the Grand Compendium that was written in 1601, it had a lot of point combinations. So there's some that we discussed from that book. And if you've not read that book, well, then you're in luck, because we'll go through some of those. We look at the APCs themselves, sometimes as a straight up combination, sometimes merged with other points to make a full treatment. And where appropriate, we will include some case studies of patients that I've seen over the years as well. This is my 29th year of actually treating patients, including when I was a student in a clinic. So plenty of case studies to work off. Across the 2 days, there is 24 APCs discussed. I couldn't fit them all into the first day, so there is a few that I've added into the following day. And it's not an exhaustive list. There is more in my book, which again is this one here, and also Jeremy Ross's book on acupuncture point combinations. And there's plenty of others in other books as well. So the APCs we're going to discuss, I mean, this is a rather wordy slide, but you can see basically what's there. As I said, we've got local and distal points. We've got 5 element partners, yin yang partners. We've got 6 division. So yin yin partners, yang yang partners. Very, very common in my international travels for people to forget the yin yin buddies and the yang yang buddies. The number of times that you could use a lung point for a spleen disharmony over the years, like, it's just something that you just see all the time, and vice versa. The number of times that you could use a stomach point for a large intestine problem and vice versa, because that's yang ming. Knowing these partnerships, not just the yin and yang ones. I mean, the reality is that how often do you use small intestine points for a heart problem? I mean, small intestine 7, sure, but many more, and vice versa. I think that you'll find much better value in using their yin yin and yang yang partners. So the heart being a yin partner of kidneys, much more kidney points valuable for heart and vice versa than the small intestine is. So bearing those in mind. We look at top and bottom combos, left and right, front and back, whole body. Then we look at the corresponding mirroring, which is a part of what Dr. Tan does, but not exclusive to that. I look at points with similar pinyin names and meanings. I add value to that, really understand the value of the names and the meanings with pinyin. So we'll talk about some examples of those. It's not exhaustive. While I think of it, if you do have questions, we will look at those at the end as well. There'll be time to talk about questions you have at the end of today, as well as regular opportunities throughout the weekend. We look at the original yin and yang combo, awesome little combo, just 2 needles. Crown and third eye, again, 2 needles, another great combo. We look at triangle of power. It's fascinating. One uses 3 needles. Open the 4 gates. I mean, again, it's probably a pretty obvious one. I think probably most people have learnt that one. Liver 3, large intestine 4 combo. 3 regions and powers is fascinating. 3 and 6s, figure 8. I mean, you can see the list. And some of these are terms of combinations that I've learnt when I studied, and others that are classical. So grade 5, for example, is a classical combination that's been around for hundreds of years. And I'm putting a little flip on it too, because it's a fascinating point combination. What if we could tweak it slightly as well? Chain and lock is one of the best combinations you'll see for musculoskeletal problems, hemiplegia, various other disorders of the musculoskeletal system. Kidney spirit gate is a great combo for Shen-based disorders and 5 spirit disorders. It's a loaded topic, meaning that some people don't agree that they do what I'm going to claim they do. And again, that makes for often quite an engaging conversation outside of workshops. It'd be like, Dave, they don't do that, and this is why. And I'll be like, well, I think they do, and this is why. So we'll have an opportunity to do that via email, perhaps. The bright foyer watchtower, court fence, and shield is a term that was coined back in the first books written on Chinese medicine, but no point combination was attached to the quote. So I've attached some combinations to the quote, which creates, hopefully, conversation. The back shoe front Mu-Yuan source, I think probably a fairly obvious combination, but should never be discounted. Because if your patient is complex, but you can nail down which organ it is or element it is, but you can't work out what's wrong, back shoe front Mu-Yuan source will take care of it for you, or at least make a start, which will then remove the fluffy stuff that's confusing everything. The newer stuff goes away, the acute stuff, and then it leaves the raw chronic condition exposed, and then your diagnostic method will become more clear. And the host guest is another classical combination, which is awesome. So that's basically day one. The combinations will have a general combination. Sometimes they'll have a theme around emotions, 5 spirits, mental well-being, or even just various other things like musculoskeletal complaints, that type of thing. So the last 3 of bright foyer, back shoe, host guest, they get moved into day 2 at the start of day 2. What also gets talked about on day 2 is APCs for 9 emotional imbalances. So what we're going to do before we do that is we're just going to spend 15 minutes or so looking at emotions historically and philosophically. So there's interesting concepts. There's ideas around why cultures thought emotions existed. So there's this wonderful Greek myth called Pandora's box. So I'm going to spend a couple of minutes talking about Pandora's box. We're going to look at what Aristotle thought about emotions. We're going to talk about what the Chinese thought about emotions. And if you are a Chinese medicine practitioner, you will have a few emotions that are typically those main 7, but then some Chinese philosophers didn't actually have the same 7. But does that matter? So there's just a little bit of a look at that as well. And, you know, some philosophers and medicine practitioners throughout history have looked at it differently as well. So some have acknowledged that emotions are important and that we still need them, because when it's relevant to express an emotion, we should express the emotion. Other philosophers and medicine practitioners have believed that you need to transcend emotions. And so that's quite an interesting concept as well. When we talk about anger, I'll give you an example of a patient that I had that had transcended anger, but then actually got quite angry at me. So it was a patient that didn't last long in my clinic. So we look at organ and element relationships. So when we look at each emotion, we look at the elements associated with it. as in 5 elements, or and then organs associated with it as well. It's not exhaustive. The idea is that you get the most likely, because if I put everything in there, it'll just be too noisy. The slides will look too busy. There's too many possible scenarios. So I'm trying to nail it down to the most likely. And then the idea being is that you go, okay, here's a patient with anger. They're probably going to have a liver disharmony or a wood element, a constitutional issue. So let's ask questions to confirm that, or to go, okay, well, it actually isn't that. So then where do we go after that? So that's the kind of design. We look at Zung Fu patterns, we look at your APCs or treatments, and then there's typically case studies as well. For example, with anger, I had 3 patients all come in within the space of a month, or with anger as a main complaint. It's really fascinating. So we'll spend a few minutes talking about those case studies as well. But we go through 9 emotional imbalances. So the main 7 plus a few extra. So you can see them here. Anger, joy / mania, they are different. Anxiety, pensiveness, worry, sadness and grief, fear, shock, depression. Depression will take the longest because you can't nail it down as easily as the others. So there is a dedicated sort of half an hour to diagnostics and APCs for depression. After that, we look at the 5 spirits, the definition or overview of them, the organ and element relationships. Just checking the time again. Typical Zung Fu patterns, again, the APCs for them, look at some case studies and how they apply in daily life. Because the 5 spirits all do different things, but they work together in different ways as well. So we look at those relationships. With the question and answers that I dedicate regularly, so typically before every break over the weekend, we will have a little question and answer opportunity. And sometimes I'll ask you questions, and other times you can ask me questions. And hopefully at the end of each day, there'll be enough opportunities to make sure that we've covered the questions that you had as well, just in case we didn't get that opportunity. The 5 spirits, or Wu Shen, is fascinating, how it defines us, or how we're defined by them and how they define us. And that's the 5 of them there. And then we look at some treatments for mental well-being. So you'll see that there's structures that are similar. Because I've been teaching for 20 years and because I've written a few books and countless workshops, I tend to find that participants like having consistent looking slides, that no matter whether we did emotions, the 5 spirits or mental well-being, the structure's the same. We get a little table that summarizes everything. Then we get a little snapshot of the definition. Then we move into an APC and then possibly a case study. So the relationships kind of stick the same way. And then there's opportunities for some group discussion off the back end of the mental well-being as well. So what are we going to look at there? We're going to look at treatments for insomnia, stress / frustration, poor memory, what they call Dian Quang, which the best label for it is manic depression, but I know we're moving away from that term and sort of giving it more a bipolar term or even some other variation on that name. The reason that I like calling it manic depression is because it tells you what Dian Quang means. Dian means depression and Quang means manic. So we'll look at that term and we'll look at schizophrenia as well. Now, the last 2 almost need their own workshops just on those. And I think that's actually, as I was constructing this workshop, I kind of got a sense that would be something that would be really good to do, because I feel like that those last 2 are undervalued, perhaps within workshops, textbooks, in terms of how we treat it in Chinese medicine. And I don't know if it's because the authors of those workshops or books are scared off in terms of offering how to treat those conditions. I imagine that in some countries around the world, you're probably not even allowed to treat this with Chinese medicine. In Australia, a lot of it you can, but there is a little part of some of these that you need to navigate a little bit more carefully. And it's always a good idea to get a general practitioner permission to treat, which not many doctors are probably going to do. So it's dicey, but I don't think that that should put us off wanting to learn it and become better at the processes involved with treating it. For me, my special interest is actually treating emotion-based conditions. So I've treated a number of people that fit within those categories, and the results just mind-blowing. And so maybe that needs to be something I look at doing later in the year, is building a workshop that is exclusively within those two labels. Watch this space. And then if there's time, because I'm not exactly sure how long it's going to take to do these 2 days, because I've never written this workshop before, if there's time, we'll just quickly summarize what was at the beginning of the first day. So it's not new content. If we don't have time to do it, it's not the end of the world. It's nice to do a quick summary though, if we've got time. So the format is that you get the APC, so you get the acupuncture point combination presented to you on a slide or on a series of slides. And then for you, during the weekend and also after the weekend, if you look back at the slides again, you decide whether to stick with that APC. And if you do, then you use it and you monitor the results, just like you would with any other treatment you did. If you're not going to stick with the formula, are you going to include some of your favorite points? Maybe I don't have your favorite points in that APC. So you go, oh, Dave, I really need to include these few because they're so important in regards to what I find beneficial for that particular patient's condition. In which case, great, add them in. I'd be keen to find out what the outcomes were. Are you going to take some points out though if you add some in? And so does the APC have your preferred number of needles? If you use 4 needles in a treatment and I've got 8 to 16 needles in the APC, well, you're going to have to take some out. So you could, because it's typically bilateral, you could, okay, well, I'll use 4 unilateral. And so that then gets you up to 8 points in total that you've treated, because as I said, bilaterally, does that make sense? Bilaterally, 4 needles become 8, 4 points become 8 needles. So if you unilateral them, you still cover at least the majority of that APC. That'll make more sense over the weekend if that didn't make sense then. So maybe you do more than 16 points, in which case you'll have to add some potentially. But it gives you a framework, a blueprint to work off. And then you just take some off or add some more, decide bilateral, unilateral, that sort of thing. That's on you, but you get a formula to work off. And so that's what this next one says. You decide whether to remove some of the points in the combination. You also need to decide if the APC is a perfect fit for you and your patient at that exact moment in time. Because again, the patient might tick all the boxes in regards to one of the APCs that you learn on the weekend, but maybe they're a little frail, a little elderly, and there's just too many needles there. And so you go, okay, well, I'm just going to take a few away. But then you get another patient that is the same point combination, but they're more robust, fitter, stronger, then you could use the entire combination. It really comes down to, you know, you're the one that's seeing your patient. I'm not in the room with you. So it's about deciding if the combination is a perfect fit for that patient. And some combinations on the same patient, you can use the entire amount on them sometimes, but not other times. And the 4 gates is an example of how you use it. Because it treats so many different things, you're going to have to add points to it that are unique for those things. So if you're using 4 gates to move chi and blood, Then you've got your liver 3, large intestine 4. Well, then you want to add some to move chi. So you, as mentioned earlier, probably gallbladder 34, pericardium 6. But then you want to move blood as well. So what are some blood movers? Let's say bladder 17, spleen 10. So that's giving you now a more rounded treatment, but you've still got your 4 gates. But then you wouldn't probably use those same points if you're using the 4 gates for bringing down chi that's rising up the body. In this instance, you're probably going to look at, say, something more like a kidney 1 to bring the energy down, anchor it. Rebellious chi would depend on the organ. If it's stomach rebellious chi, you're probably looking at stomach 44, stomach 36, maybe stomach 42. If it's, what's another one that goes up? Gallbladder chi can rise. In that case, you're probably going to go to gallbladder 34, maybe gallbladder 40. I can't think of a point that's really good for bringing down chi that's rising on the gallbladder. Is it gallbladder 41? Especially if it affects the eyes and the ears. So it's that type of thing, gallbladder 43. So you're using the 4 gates, but you've got to change the points you're using depending on the overall diagnosis. So about me quickly. So we did sort of do that with Donna, and we're sort of coming through to a point where we're going to ask some questions shortly. As she said, I did do a master's degree. I am thinking of doing a PhD. I nearly did one a few years ago, but couldn't find the right universities and the right supervisors. But that's pending. Clinical practice, I've been treating patients since 1993, 1994, sorry, when I actually treated people in student clinic, and I've been treating ever since. My special interest, as talked about, is more emotion-based conditions. I like understanding a person's archetype. So I don't typically hone that in on, say, 5-element archetypes. I love that. I also look at their 5 spirits and look to see which one might be a bit excess, what ones might be deficient, try to balance that out. I have a real interest in numerology and use that sometimes as an archetype system. It's not defined down to one thing, Myers-Briggs. So even though I'm a Chinese medicine practitioner, I don't mind using bits and pieces from different areas. Sometimes if the patient is really complex, I'll even look at drawings, getting them to draw them picking an apple off an apple tree, getting them to draw a picture of them and their family in a scene. Because people's drawings give you a good look at what's happening deeper inside their sort of subconscious mind, and that can be quite helpful as well. So there's a few ways I look at doing things. I used to be lecturing at Endeavour College of Natural Health. Currently now I'm actually head of department, sorry, not head of, start again. I've lectured, I've been head of department and at various colleges over the last 20 years. My current position is not at Endeavour College anymore in Brisbane. I'm now the module leader for the Chinese classics subject at the Northern College of Acupuncture in York in the UK. It's a distance thing, obviously, being I live in Brisbane and COVID. So that's my current role in terms of lecturing students. We talked about the books. I'll mention them again in a minute. So I've written subjects for various colleges around the world. I've written courses, certificates, diplomas, bachelors, Bachelor of Chinese Medicine, courses like Diploma of Tuina, done 2 of them at different colleges is the word I'm trying to get out. So maybe you've worked out by now I like researching and I like writing. And then once I've written it, if it's really interesting, I don't want to then just hoard it on my computer and go, this is just for me. I like to get it out into the world and give people the opportunity to learn more. Presented at a lot of conferences around the world. I think at the point I've been to over a dozen different countries and presented at conferences, done my own workshops. This was supposed to be a live event. Donna and I had flagged that pre-COVID, but we'll make the most of the situation. In regards to this, is not relevant to this workshop, but just in case you are interested, COVID in Australia is pretty much under control. We do have people coming from overseas that do have COVID, and so there are a few cases in Australia, but not many. We're very lucky that we're a standalone island, and we only have 25 million people that live in this huge country. So we've got it pretty under control. I think to date there's less than 500 active cases in all of Australia, and none in Queensland currently, I don't believe. So we're lucky. Where is Brisbane in relation to LA? Let's see if this little slide works. I don't know if it will. Might not. No, it didn't. Sorry. I tried to be all clever and show you a little zoom of where Brisbane is in relation to Los Angeles. But a lot of you don't live in Los Angeles anyway, so maybe you can do a little Google map search yourself. Hang on. There we go. It even tells you how much a plane trip's going to cost at the moment. Go figure. So LA, there's Brisbane down there. At the moment, we're smack in the middle of summer. It's about 35 degrees, which is nearly 100 degrees Fahrenheit and about 80% humidity. So it's pretty gross, but we've got air conditioning, so it's good. Anyway, that gives you a sense of where we are in the world. Now, how do I go back to my other screen? Is the big question. I'll go back to my original screen. There we go. Now, hopefully that came back up for you. No. Sorry. I made a change and now share screen. One part slide. I won't do that again. Are we all good? Is that back up? Apologies. I try to be all clever and then potentially stuff it up. So we have my contact details. That's my best Facebook page because it tells you where I am and what I'm doing when the world opens up again. That's my email address for you to contact me. My blog is free. Jump on there. It's got lots of different stuff for you to look at. There's no charge for it at any time, but it's musings about Chinese medicine. Sometimes it's about Chinese history. Sometimes it's about philosophy. Sometimes Chinese philosophy, but sometimes Western philosophy. Sometimes it's just got me musing about things that have happened in my world as well. The two books we mentioned, you can see there. So this one's over 150,000 words in it, and it goes through the APCs that we learn over the weekend, but more, and also other content. Chapters on 5 elements, for example, archetype systems, various other bits and pieces. And this one is over 1,000 disorders with points listed. To look up a disorder A to Z, the points are listed, and that's it, bang. Nice, easy clinical assistance in regards to, oh, it's a patient I haven't treated before, look up the condition, there's the points, do the treatment. And then if you want to learn more, there's a reference to where I got the information from. So obviously they're two very different books. One just gives you the information, the other one teaches you how to construct your own combinations. So the disclaimer very quickly is in regards to acupuncture point combinations, the point combinations sometimes are classical, so I don't change them. And I talk about them, and then I might add additional point combinations that split that combination. But when I do that, I explain it. The combinations that are in this weekend workshop are, they are unique to this workshop. They are not anywhere else, but there's also, it's important to remember that I could try to come up with a unique combination, but I also need to stick with the combination as a classical combination if it relates, or if it's a combination that is the same no matter what, in which case, sure, the different places, different workshops I've done might have the same combination because it's what's out there. It's in what's Chinese medicine space. In terms of terminology and definitions, sure, different workshops that I've done will have the same types of terminology, but that's what you're going to learn when you study as well. So that's just, again, make sure we're clear on that. Regarding treatments, the APC, it's the same type of thing. So the treatments as well can be different depending on what you're using the combination for. And we talked about that briefly just before with, say, the 4 gates. The 4 gates can't change because that's the name of the combination, and that's the points that are part of that combination. But the combination can change in terms of what you add to it. And so depending on what you're using it for, will change the treatment. And I'm not treading on the toes of any other acupuncture treatment style. If Dr. Tan is something that you use, this is a different way of looking at something. It doesn't mean that my way is better or Dr. Tan's way is better. It's just expanding your frame, your idea of how you might look at treating something. So it's another way of looking at something. We're pretty much done. And basically, this is what we're going to talk about over the weekend. So in regards to this workshop, it is designed to stretch your thinking about how to construct treatments. We talked about that about half an hour ago. So again, we don't really need to go into that anymore. Try to come into the workshop with an open mind. I may challenge your views or be completely counter to them. That's the thing with Chinese medicine. There is often regular contradictions. I mean, if we look at the Yellow Emperor Classic, the first book written on Chinese medicine, there's contradictions, not consistently, but at times in that text. And that doesn't mean that one idea is right and one idea is wrong. They can both work. It often comes down to what we value as the most important approach. So I've got, say, do 20 Bai Hui in a number of combinations throughout the weekend because it's wonderful for regulating emotions. But it's a point that probably about half the people in this workshop on the weekend may not use because they don't like it. But that doesn't mean that then the whole point combination is void. Just change do 20 for a point that you do use. Or you like the combination, leave do 20 out and do the rest of the combination. There's ways to tweak it. Okay, so there might be sometimes a little bit of backwards and forwards in regards to points I've chosen as opposed to your favorite ones, or even the way that I do the combination might be a contradiction to the way that you would do it. Some of the point combinations might seem simple, but you might be surprised. Now, the 4 gates is an example of that. It does 10 different grouped things, which often people don't realize just how many things it can actually treat. So the workshop goals is that hopefully you'll learn something new. I'd be very surprised if you didn't. Be reminded of something you'd forgotten. That's always gold. I love that when that happens, when you go, oh, that's right. Oh, I've completely forgotten that. It's sitting in the back of the brain somewhere, and then it just goes ping, back there again. And it never hurts to be reminded of knowledge you already know. So it's reaffirming. It's like, that's what I thought. It's great to be reminded of that. So those 3 things are what the goals are ultimately in regards to what you get out of this workshop. So that's it in terms of my content. Oh, good work. So I've got about 12 minutes or so, if needed, to move into questions that people have. I've got a few little starters here. I've already asked where people are from, for how long you've been practicing, that type of thing. We can ask a lot of these as well throughout the workshop, but also what you have. Maybe you've got some questions for me about the workshop. Maybe you're undecided as to whether you're still going to do it on the weekend. So if you've got questions, you need to ask me about that. It's an opportunity to get into that side of things as well. So let me open up perhaps the chat room. So fire away the questions or answer some of the ones I had there. one new message. Carlos, so my books are available on Amazon. I don't have a website yet, which is very silly of me, but I'm in the process of that. There's the questions back. Yeah, Amazon you can, but also the Acupoint Dictionary is also available from Elsevier or Churchill Livingston, and the Acupuncture Point Combination book is from Singing Dragon. So those publishers are both in multiple places around the world, so you can access them. But Amazon does it too. Tuning forks, yeah, I use tuning forks sometimes. My mother actually went to America to study tuning forks, acutonics firstly, and then biofield. So I've learnt all of those, and I do use tuning forks sometimes on the body or with the forks as well. Use the needles and the forks together. In which situation should we follow the APC strategy? It probably comes down to what situation we're talking about, but really for every point combination that we talk about throughout the weekend, that's a framework. So it's the start off point that you then look at, I guess, critically, and decide if that's exactly the way that you want to treat your patient at that moment in time, or whether you want to alter it slightly. If your patient or the point combination is a little bit confusing, then we can email each other in order to go through that process together. Or you try something and see if it works and go from there. Sometimes it's trial and error. You know, I mean, Western drugs that appear that general practitioners prescribe, you know, when they're first on the market, even though they've been researched and clinical trials done on it, it's still a bit of guesswork to some degree that the doctor's giving you a drug to take. Is it going to suit you exactly? And so sometimes with these APCs, that's what you've got to do. You just give it a try and see how it works. Hello, David. Thank you. Do the tongue points or systems figure in your work and workshop? Look, at times, it's like Dr. Tan as well. I mean, sometimes they're there, but it's not exactly the same system. Obviously, with Dr. Tan and Master Tung, they're often specific point names that they term. And so sometimes you might even have a point that is partway along a channel and isn't even a point. It might be, you know, pericardium 3.5 or something like that. So in that instance, I guess it's not exactly the same, and it's not part of the APCs throughout the weekend as a specific theme. So if it pops up from time to time within the acupuncture point combinations, well, so be it. Sometimes the chain and lock combination will have a little bit of that Master Tung, Dr. Tan in it, because the points you use on the channels are not always going to be the points that are actual points. So I hope that that answered your question, Joe. What else we got? Looks like there's a couple of places the questions come up. Did it make sense? Did I talk too fast? These are all considerations, hopefully not. I can't answer that question, but Donna will be able to. Thanks, Joe. I think the thing with the APCs, do you want to say something, Donna?
No. I was just popping in.
Thank you. I think the thing with the combinations is that they, as I said, I guess to summarize, they're a place to start, and they're not all mine. In fact, the vast majority of them are modern APCs from other places or classical, I guess maybe not so much classical, but let's say pre-modern. So there's been a number of them throughout the centuries. And it's about the opportunity to take what I know from the history and bring it into something that's modern, which allows you to use pre-modern Chinese medicine texts and even the classics to some degree in your modern clinic. So how to take something from 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, 2,000 years ago, and bring it into today, which is really exciting. I like the concept of that. Thank you for the feedback there.
I think we got all the questions. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, David, for today's great webinar. And thank you everyone for joining us. Today's webinar has been recorded. So if you'd like to watch it again, it will be available on the TC Wisdom Tube tomorrow afternoon. And as promised, you can sign up to audit David's Saturday's class with our Watch It Free promotion. Acupuncture point combinations matter. Clinical pearls for the 5 spirits, emotions, and mental well-being, part 1. All you have to do when registering is enter the coupon code POINTSWW. That's POINTSWW. Enter the coupon code when you register for part 1's class, which is on Saturday, and you will see that the amount will come out to 0. So the Watch It Free promotion is to audit the class only. It's only free viewing for the live event. It doesn't include CEUs or the video replay. However, if you do want CEUs or the video replay or both, you can just sign up for it and don't enter the coupon code. And the registration fee is only $135. The Watch It Free promotional code POINTSWW does end at midnight today, so be sure to sign up if you are interested in attending. We would love to have you. That's it for today, everyone. Thank you guys so much, and we will see you this weekend. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Mm.